Hello and welcome to the C3 Method podcast. Today we're going to be discussing how you can carb load for peak performance. Just had a client this past weekend run a half marathon. She's done over 10 full marathons. I'm not even sure how many half marathons, a bunch. She's done a lot. And she hit a PR, which was awesome. And it was highly attributable to an increase in attention to her nutrition. So that's what I want to talk about today. It's common in the running world, but also in strength sports, the concept of carb loading to improve peak performance. Another running coach who's going through our nutrition coaching certification program sent a question to me, and it was a calculator that someone can use online to calculate how many carbs they would need to load into a running event. Now, the calculator had some personal data you could enter, gender, age, height, weight, the length of the run, whether it's a half marathon, full marathon, 50K, whatever. And it would spit you out this carbohydrate number. And then she asked what my thoughts were. Now, it was interesting to see that the calculator did ask some personalizing information. However, it missed an enormous amount of information that would come into play when we're deciding on what is the right amount of carbohydrates and the right timing for carbohydrate loading. So it was cool that all kind of came together. Had a coach who's run 10 plus full marathons, a bunch of half marathons, finally give that extra oomph into her nutrition, and boom, PR. I forget by how much, but it was like 2 minute, 3 minute PR. And that was great, especially at that level. When you're that elite, that level, hitting any kind of PR is pretty awesome, let alone, minutes long kind of PR. Then the nutrition coach sending that calculator, it was kind of cool that all combined at the same time. So what I want to do today is kind of mention what that calculator didn't factor into, what it didn't account for, how we can account for those right things, and then just talking through the general concept of carb loading, whether it's for an endurance event or a strength event. Those are different because our usage of carbohydrates in those events is different. You think about somebody running a half marathon or a full marathon, when they use their carbohydrates, well, let's just say that the effort they're giving is a slow, steady state effort over a long period of time. So an hour or more or several hours, depending on their ability to run a half marathon or full marathon. And then you think about strength, especially the sports such as powerlifting, where they're actually just doing bursts of effort. They're going to warm up in their squat and then do 3 big single rep attempts. Then they're going to sit around for an hour and a half, 2 hours, warm up their bench, 3 big single rep attempts, sit around for a few hours, warm up their deadlift, 3 big single rep attempts. So theirs is a very high spike and then a really low, dull, nothing happening, then high spike. Even if you look at competitive strongmen, who I train as well, they might have 5 events in one day if it's a local competition. If it's a bigger level competition, maybe the 5 events are split across 3 days, and then it's more similar to a powerlifting competition. But those strength sports are going to be more so peaks and valleys, whereas endurance events is a slow, steady burn the whole time. Now, the reason why that's important is that strength sports, in those lulls, in the valleys, they have chances to refeed their glycogen stores to a larger degree and with more comfort than an endurance athlete. They're going to have a harder time ingesting carbohydrates while they're moving. They can definitely do that, obviously gel packs and all these other strategies. However, the volume they can consume needs to be often smaller in food volume. So you're looking for more calorically dense items. And then digestibility is extremely important. So that way they can consume it while they're moving and not have bathroom issues. So that is one factor to consider in regards to how many carbohydrates I would need to have before the event based on how many carbohydrates I can actually consume during the event. And then even within each of those categories, if you have somebody who gets super nervous and they usually don't eat anything while they practice or train, it's like, oh, that's definitely not going to optimize performance. And you would need to ease them into eating more. Whereas I have some people, they have no problems whatsoever with nerves and they're excited for competitions and they can, ingest a whole bunch, even on the event day, and they do fine. So even within each individual sport, there isn't just a one strategy fits all, because each person has to have their own way of using that strategy that matches their physiology the best. This is why I love personalized, customized coaching, is because oftentimes people will see kind of this calculator that the client sent, and it said, for example, I put in my numbers, and if I was running a half marathon, it told me I should have 800 grams of carbohydrates as my carb load. And it's like, oh, okay, so I'm supposed to eat 800 grams of carbs right before a half marathon? Good luck to me. Not sure if that's going to digest well. And how would I stretch that out? Would I start 24 hours before the race? And that's when I should start my 800 grams of carbs loading, or should it be 12 hours before? Should it be 4 hours before? Should it be 48 hours before? There's just a ridiculous amount of unknowns. And I like being able to help people solve the unknowns so that way experiences are a lot better for mental and emotional health, but let alone being able to peak their performance and see what we can do with them physically. But I really like the emotional, mental benefit of being able to take somebody through a process and have it be as customized to them as possible so they get the best experience. And that was really what motivated me to become a coach in the first place. Is when I was growing up, I hated the way I looked. And I associated that with being mentally weak. Like, I allowed myself to look like that. Oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? And it was through learning nutrition, exercise, implementing that knowledge, and being able to see progressions over time that I was able to kind of heal my emotional and mental health. And that was, it changed my life. It absolutely changed my life. And that's what I want to be able to give to my clients, is that same feeling. So I really love the idea of customizing everything, and I'm already ranting on quite a bit. But what you'll hear in today's podcast is that there are some general concepts of approach in how to carb load somebody for peak performance, but then there's going to be a ton of trial and error, live and learn, and hopefully you can learn off of someone else's errors. That would be the benefit of getting a coach. They've made their own mistakes over all the years. They've learned a lot about what not to do, and they've worked with a lot of clients and gained a lot of experience in those circumstances as well. So for me, the first thing I would look at when I'm loading an athlete is, what have we been doing going into the event? One of the mistakes that carb load calculator made was it didn't even mention total calories, and it didn't have any idea of what the person was eating coming into that carb loading. So let's say, for example, they wanted you to carb load starting 24 hours before the event. Well, are you loading from a place of your glycogen stores already being full, half depleted, or fully depleted? If you look at endurance runners, this is going to be a huge generalization. Let's just go with the concept. It might not be true for each individual, but in general, they often undereat. That's typically what I find when I work with my endurance athletes, is they undereat carbohydrates for the most part. They almost always undereat protein, and their fats are kind of hit and miss. But usually they are, if they're eating maintenance calories, that would be awesome. That would be a good thing compared to what I normally see. If they're eating maintenance calories, usually it's too low of protein, fats somewhere in where it should be, kind of, sort of, maybe. And then carbs can be very high, but they're usually mistimed, meaning they're going to have insufficient carbs before their training, and then often way too many carbs outside of their training. They're going to have that skinny fat look, and they're going to be fighting off small little injuries and annoyances all the time. That's typically the state that people come to me at, is they're training a long time, they've got past all the newbie gains, and they're just not sure why things aren't progressing, why they don't look the way they want to look, why their performance has plateaued or it's actually regressing. And that's usually why, is the Calories, if they're being counted, they're usually only maintenance, not actually at progressive performance, progressive adaptation type calorie balance. And then often the carbohydrates are completely mistimed and the protein's too low. So if someone's coming into an event, I like to start as far ahead as possible, getting them to a healthy caloric range. And we might find that on days they have their higher volume of training, we might eat a little bit into a calorie surplus. Then days of lower volume or rest days, we might eat into a calorie deficit. So that way, on the days they move more, they eat more. On the days they move less, they eat less. That helps us control body fat. We also will try to peak their energy sources, whether that's a mixture of carbs and fats, or whatever percentage of those two. We're going to try to peak that around their activity. So you think about, if I move more in the morning, I want to eat more in the morning. If I move less at night, I want to eat less at night. But if somebody's, inverse of that, then that's how we would shift it for them. We just want wherever their energy peak during the day is, their output is during the day, we want their food intake to match that peak. So that way we're eating into the activity, but then we're eating down away from the activity. That is going to help them, again, maximize performance and also help regulate body fat. That way they don't have any unnecessary body fat that they don't want. They can also still have a really good body composition, and they can properly manage also their protein as well. We tend to taper protein down leading into the event and then taper protein up coming out of the event. So that way they have more protein when their body's looking for protein for recovery, but leading into the event, protein is lower, which allows us to intake more of the energy nutrients that we actually do need. If they try to keep protein too high leading into the event, they're just going to be too full and have stomach problems trying to get in enough energy nutrients. So the peak and valley that we have in protein isn't quite as extreme. It's a smaller reduction leading into the event and a smaller increase coming out of the event, but it is inverse related to the energy nutrients, which would be carbs and fats. So this is something I like to get them used to before the event, before like their race or competition or whatever, just in our practice. We want to get them to see what they can be comfortable with intaking before their event. How does that relate to digestion? How does that relate to performance? And then we also need to start to factor in sodiums, factor in fluid, and try to essentially figure out what's the most that we can fill you up before the event that doesn't cause digestive problems. That's essentially what we're looking to do. I've had clients where they would say, oh, I just can't run in the morning with anything in my stomach. I have to train on an empty stomach. It's like, well, that's not perfect. So let's still work on that, even if it's a small little something before the, even if you just eat a pack of M&Ms, 100-calorie pack of M&Ms before you go for a run. I don't care. Let's just start with that. And then we'll also carb load them the night before. So this is a fun technique, is if somebody does their highest activity in the morning, that doesn't mean you have to wake up and start pounding down food. We actually can eat the carbohydrates the night before at the last meal. And that's the carb loading concept, is you're giving the body carbohydrates, asking it to store it in a form of glycogen, which is carbohydrates, sodium, and water stored in our muscles. It's energy basically in our muscles, like gasoline in a gas tank. This is energy in our muscles to be used. You can do that, but it also depends on what they were eating during the day. So usually we would taper the carbohydrates down during the day, so that way their glycogen stores are emptied out or lowest, by the end of the day. So then when they eat those carbohydrates, it doesn't cause just a bunch of fat formation. It actually gets stored as glycogen, so they wake up, their glycogen stores are full. Now, if somebody trains in the evenings, we don't need to do that. We're gonna go to bed empty, we're gonna wake up empty, and then eat and fill in throughout the day, so that way they can have the energy during the day, and we have that energy then left by the time in the evening when they're most active. If they were to eat all their food at night, then during the day we have to control their calories, which would mean that we require to bring down the carbs and fats. They would end up burning off the glycogen by the time they got to their evening event. So the timing of carbohydrates, if you look at it in relation to the peak of their events, it's always the same. You want to eat your energy nutrients increasingly into the time of the activity, decreasingly coming out of the time of activity. Now, if you do it in the morning versus in the evening, it'll change in the sense of what you have before you go to bed food-wise or what you have in the morning food-wise, but the concept of peaking up into the activity and coming down out of the activity is always the same. So that's something I would always look into, is when a client asks, how should I carb load for an event? I'll be like, well, what in the heck are you doing right now? And we would try to address that way before the event to see what is their tolerable amount, and then also what percentage. Some clients feel better at a higher fat percentage, lower carbohydrate percentage. Maybe they don't have as much energy at the get-go of the event, but maybe they're highly nervous. They have really good, like, kind of anxious energy. They can burn that up and use that. Maybe they're really excited and fired up and ready to go, and that excitement kind of carries them, that adrenaline carries them through the first part of the event. So really, they just need more of that slow burn type energy, so they might do better with higher fat percentage. Whereas some clients, they want to have that energy boost at the beginning, and their emotional state, how they feel like they're going to perform, really relies on that. So we would have a higher carbohydrate percentage and a lower fat percentage, and that might get them that energy they want at the beginning, and then they can kind of just grind out, if there's any little bit of lull at the end, they can kind of grind that out. Now, this is actually really cool. I've gotten to learn and experience this in my own self. When I've competed in powerlifting, I get really excited to compete. I absolutely just get, it just fires me up. And my body actually kind of goes numb. So I have to remind myself to eat. I have like high adrenaline, high just excitement. Is you could just tell me that, like for example, is I'll eat something because I have to, because I know I'm supposed to, before squats, and I'll go out there and I'll have fun, crush my squat, and then usually for bench I'll have a little bit of food, but I'm just excited to go do the bench. And then for deadlift, I'm just so excited. Like the last time I did a big competition, my first deadlift attempt on the platform was over 600. I just pulled 315 for 1 rep, and that was my warm-up. I was just excited and ready to go. So I did 315, 1 rep in the back, and then went out in the front and did 600 plus pound in my first attempt. I was just excited. So not the smartest thing to do in terms of protecting the body for the muscles and whatnot, but that was my response. Is I had to learn, okay, what does it feel like when the athlete does not give a crap about food? They just want to go do the event. Now, for me, it was positive excitement. For clients I've had, it's been, nervousness excitement, where it's kind of, they worry whether they're going to do well or not. Whereas I was just like, screw it, I don't care. I'm just going to go lift something. So it's fun to see how I personally respond, get to see how that feels from an athlete's perspective. And then by working with so many clients over the years, it's been fun to see, okay, if you have a client that responds this way, but now I've had, a couple dozen, if not 100 plus that respond that way. So for example, I've worked with over 3,000 people over a 25-year career. So it's been a lot. It's been a lot of experiences, which is, I love it. It's super fun. And you just get to kind of see what are the commonalities of each person's nervousness style and eating style. And then, okay, if they have this style, if they like to eat beforehand, do they do fats or carbs? What's the balance? What tends to work best for them? And these are all great things to figure out in training, not the day of competition. So this is what our training is for. It's not only to prepare our body for the physical aspects of competition, but also to prepare ourselves for nutrition, for emotional states, for all the other things that are implemented within that day. So usually what I look to do is get somebody, like I said, if we want to kind of figure this out here, I'll give you some numbers to start taking away and put this to yourself, is you can go to calculator.net. There's a BMR calculator on there that I use quite often. You can put in gender, age, height, weight. If you know your body fat percentage, you can put that in there. If you don't, they have a calculation for just general without a body fat percentage considered. That will give you your BMR, and then also on that page, they'll give you a calculation of, if you're active 2 to 3 days a week, here's usually where your maintenance calories are, 4 to 5 days a week, maintenance calories, blah, 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 blah. So you would find out around the ballpark of where your maintenance calories should be. On the days you're most active, go 10% above that number. On the days you're less active, go 10% less. That's going to help you regulate body fat. And then if you're around the body weight you want, that's going to keep you around the body weight you want with a slow improvement of body composition over time. Now, if you want to push your weight up, you might do 20% over that maintenance number on active days and at maintenance number on inactive days. That's going to give you a slow surplus over time. If you need to bring your weight down, maybe you're going to do 20% below maintenance on non-training days, maintenance on training days. That's going to give you a slow, sustainable deficit, so that'll bring your weight down over time. Then, once we have calories accounted for, protein is, my recommendation is around 0.8 grams per pound of body weight if you're an endurance runner. If you don't even get close to that right now, aim for 0.6 grams per pound of body weight. Try to get used to that for a week or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever you can do consistently, then bump it up to 0.7, then bump it up to 0.8. Usually 0.8 is pretty good. That'll give you your protein amount within your total calories. The remaining calories, once you subtract the calories of the protein, is then where your carbs and fats should be. Now, you can have any variance within there percentage-wise of carbs and fats. Depends on your preference. If you like to eat more fat-based foods and you have a higher fat percentage, totally fine. As long as your total calories are where they need to be, your protein's where they need to be, you can distribute your carbs and fats however the heck you want. Doesn't matter. Now, distribution throughout the day, like we said, we want to peak our carbohydrates and fats ahead of and around the time of our activities, and then bring them lower outside of that. If we break our day down, this is a way to do this in your head, is if you break your day down into 3 around 5 to 6 hour sections. So the time you wake up, the first 5 to 6 hours of being awake, then there's the next 5 to 6 hours of being awake, and then the final 5 to 6 hours of being awake. For most people, that's going to fit their schedule. If we think of that, we have 3 sections. If we were to evenly distribute our calories, we would do it by thirds. So we'd have a third of our calories in the first window, the first 5 to 6 hours. We'd have a third of our calories in the second 5 to 6 hours, and a third of our calories in the third 5 to 6 hours. I would suggest you get used to that first, is just break your calories and your protein down into thirds and get them evenly distributed across those 3 time frames of the day. Once you get used to that, though, you can then start to shift your carbs and fats to where you might now pull out some of that. Instead of like 33% in each window, maybe you're going to do 40% before the event, 40% after the event, then 20% at the time away from the event. So if you work out in the morning, you use 40% of your carbs and fats in the morning window and the midday window, and then only 20% in the evening. That will be a way to kind of shift that distribution to favor more towards when you're more active. And conversely, if you're more active in the evening, you might only do 20% of your carbs and fats in the first 5 to 6 hours, and then 40% in the remaining 2 5 to 6 hour blocks. So that is how we can figure out our total calories, figure out our total protein, figure out our distribution, starting with even thirds, then shifting it around to kind of match our performance. That would be, for most people, a huge improvement of what they currently do, and you're going to get an improvement in your performance. Now, leading into the event, it depends on muscle mass, it depends on the type of event you're doing. There's a lot of things it depends on. But what I would think of, and this is something you can play around with, is that we're going to go with more endurance athletes in this one, is the day before the event, you don't really have a lot of muscle damage that you're trying to heal from. You're probably also trying to minimize as much activity as you possibly can. You're just trying to have a nice chilled day. So on that day, what we can do is we can lower our protein down. So instead of 0.8 grams per pound of body weight, we can drop that to 0.4 grams per pound of body weight. Then that difference of calories, the calories that we just reduced from protein, you can put back in as carbohydrates. That will help you more likely have fuller glycogen storage, and that will lean more towards being carb loaded for peak performance. But you're still going to be able to control your calories. You're still going to be controlling enough protein to not fall too far behind in any kind of like maintenance and repair because you're just doing it for one day. But that's something you can play with if you want to have a little more intricacies to what you're doing. Is if you play with that structure, you're going to notice that you're going to have better energy. And you're going to find that you just have this little more resiliency, a little more pep in your step going into the event. So that is a really easy way to set up carb loading. And then how you would load that throughout the day, that day before the event, is I would probably recommend you do it like evenly distributed, because that increase in carbohydrates is going to be a considerable amount of food, and you might have trouble trying to fit that all in at the end of the day. So if you just spread your food out throughout the day, that's a good structure for it as well. And since you're not super active during that day, you're not putting the food in and burning it right off. You will be putting it in at a greater rate than what you're burning it off. So that way you can feel more loaded, carb loaded by the end of the day. Then the morning of, you would try to have the carbohydrate amount that you would have already been used to in your training and normal life that we've already been practicing, hopefully for a couple weeks, if not a couple months. You would just kind of eat as is. If you want to, you can add a little bit more carbohydrates if your stomach can handle it. If you get super nervous and you can't eat anything, maybe you can drink some carbs, get some Gatorade or some kind of sports drink, fruit juice. Sometimes fruit juice can mess people up. The fructose in that can kind of upset people's stomachs. But any kind of like sugary type fluid is a good thing to do, just to get a little bit of hydration, but also get some of the sugars in you. And then you can do like easy to digest whole foods. For some people, that can be things like graham crackers, animal crackers. They make those honey stingers, kind of like cookie waffle things that people will eat for endurance. Just getting some simple carbohydrates in you. You can also do some cereal. Frosted Flakes, Cheerios, things like that. Something that gets you a little bit of something in your face, but it doesn't feel overwhelming or too stressful in your digestive system. That is essentially what I would recommend to start playing with and practicing with in your training, and getting used to consuming food leading into your event, and then finding out, okay, what's the peak amount for me to where I can digest it well, but I also feel like I have a ton of energy. So we went through how to figure out total calories, protein, how to distribute your percentage. Like we said, it really doesn't matter. Percentage of carbs and fats is preferential. But then how to distribute your calories and protein throughout the day. And then, like we said, the day before an event, you can drop your protein in half, replace those calories with carbohydrates, see how you feel by doing that, spread that out throughout that whole day. Make sure you have a little bit of something in the morning, whether that's fluid or whole food or a mixture of the two. But that's going to help you get a framework that you can use now to carb load leading into your performance. And then during the performance, you would try to load in as much as you can, whatever is tolerable. It really is individual dependent. It depends on just a ton of factors. So I don't really have anything great that I can throw out in this podcast. I've had people do the minimalist amount possible, like literally just sip on water as they run, and they've crushed things and done great. I've had other people who've had a very questionable amount of sugar and gels while they ran, and they did great. It was totally fine for them. They didn't have bathroom issues. And then for powerlifters, oh my gosh, everything under the sun. Some people eat muffins and brownies and cookies, oh my. And they'll have that all throughout the day and they're doing totally fine. Other people, we might just have some, bagels with a little bit of like jelly on that. And they seem to do well with bagels, jelly, and Gatorade. And that's simple for them, but it works well for them. So it can be pretty extreme in regards to the individual differences when you're talking about actual event time feeding. But that's the fun of it. That's why I definitely recommend experimenting, writing things down, seeing how you feel as you go through it all. Hopefully this was some fun information that gives you a little bit of details you can take and run with. But also, I just wanted to highlight that there's a lot that goes into this, and a lot of it is live and learn. So don't be discouraged if you try an approach that you get like on a calculator online, or such and such, person that you've trained with before or friends with, they say they do XYZ and you're like, my gosh, I tried that and it was horrible. Or the calculator was horrible. Just learn, like take notes. See what you liked, see what you didn't like, experiment and play with it a little bit, talk to more people, listen to more podcasts, read some more books. The more information you get, it can be confusing at first, but there is this post-complexity simplicity concept to where as you feel overwhelmed at first getting a ton of information, as you experiment and put the information to practice, you'll start to realize, oh, this thing doesn't work for me, this thing doesn't work for me, but this one does and this one does. And now all of a sudden you start to find clarity through that chaos. If you have any questions, if you need anything, you can always reach out to us on our website, www.c3method.com. The 3 is spelled out T-H-R-E-E, so it's C-T-H-R-E-E method.com. You can sign up to do one-on-one coaching, and I'll help you with everything, personalize everything to you. Or you can, if you want, you can sign up for our nutrition coaching system. So if you're a running coach, strength coach, whatever you might be, we also work with chiropractors, physical therapists, massage therapists, you name it. Any kind of sports coach. If you want to get a nutrition certification and learn how to do nutrition coaching, not only in a general state, but also how to do it customized to each person that you work with, that's exactly what our certification teaches. We also teach you how to market the service, and we stick around and help you implement the service as well. Most certifications are read this book, take this test, and there you go. We have it to where we actually teach you our system one-on-one. I will do a virtual time with you, teach you our system one-on-one, face-to-face, and then we have you implement the system, and we support you for 3 full months as you work with individual clients. We're there to answer questions every day if you need. So it's a really awesome service. It's what I wish I had. And that's the premise of how we made it, is what would I want if I were in your situation? That's how we set up our certification. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out on our website, and then whatever platform you're watching or listening to this on, you can always put comments, and I'll probably get some kind of notification about it. So I appreciate you sharing your time with us. If you need anything, please reach out. I'm always here, and I'm always happy to help. Thank you.